Welcome, buonasera, benvenuti alla Casa Italiana Zerilli-marimò. My name is Chiara Basso and I'm the social and communication specialist here at Casa Italiana. Professor and director Stefano Albertini couldn't be here today, he's traveling back from Italy. Yeah, and but I will read a message from him later. Tonight's event, it begins with a name, is the first Alba Capriati lecture. And to explain what is the Alba Capriati lecture, I will have Ms. Giusetta Capriati here on stage. She's one of our warmest supporters here at Casa. Thank you, Giusetta.
Good evening. My name is Giusetta Capriati, and Alba was my sister. She died 3.5 years ago for the consequences of COVID. Our parents came from the south of Italy, from Bari, but after they got married, they moved to Rome, so we were born in Rome. I was born under a bombing. I weighed 2.5 pounds, and everybody thought I was not going to survive, but I did. And my sister, being 10 years older, was always taking care of me. She considered herself my second mom. She had incredible manual skills. She was very good at embroidering, knitting, sewing. She used to make dresses for my dolls, and she embroidered my first evening dress. She was also very good at cooking. Every time I went back to Italy, she would prepare my favorite dishes. And in the 80s, I had moved to New York 10 years earlier. My mother and Alba came to visit me here in New York. It was their first trip abroad, their first airplane flight. They fell in love with New York. In those days, Casa Italiana didn't exist. But later in the 90s, we met Baroness Zerilli-marimò, and we became very good friends. And guess what? My mother and the Baroness died different years, but the same day, October 16, and the same time, around 10 p.m. at night. Unbelievable. Anyway, so the friendship with Baroness Zerilli-marimò convinced me to donate a tree to the garden of Casa Italiana when my mother passed away in 2006. And when Alba died 3.5 years ago, I decided to sponsor a series of 5 lectures devoted to women during the month of March. And I'm very happy that the first lecture devoted to Alba happens on the occasion of the 113th anniversary of the deadly Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where so many Italian-Americans women died. And I'm glad that finally a monument is being built in their memory. And I congratulate Casa Italiana for the beautiful collective ribbon exhibit upstairs that closes, I believe, this week. So my sister, as I said, had great manual skills. She was also very, very close to our mother. She attended to her when she got sick. And that's why when she died 3.5 years ago, she was cremated, Alba was cremated, and her ashes lie together in the same grave with my mother in the family chapel of the cemetery of Bari. And so I would just like to say that Alba would have identified herself with the 146 victims of this deadly tragic accident. So that's why I'm very happy that our first lecture coincides with this anniversary. Thank you.
And in fact, tonight we will talk about memory, we will talk about with women, and also about labor rights, because the Triangle Fire actually was the beginning of a big campaign for labor rights in the United States. And we will talk also about how this tragedy had an impact on so many people, not only contemporary people, but also people that heard about this tragedy later. And Eddie will explain to us what this tragedy means for people today, even young students, like her student Etrita, which is one of our guests. And Ms. Jennifer Merz will explain the development that follow after this tragedy. So it's a rich night. But before I introduce better our guests, please allow me to show you a short documentary produced by Casa Italiana that explains better what the fire memorial is about and why Casa Italiana is so involved in this memorial and this tragedy. Thank you.
Every morning when I come to work, when I come to the Casa, I pass by the Brown Building. The Brown Building is the building where the tragedy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire took place on March 25th, 1911. And there is a small plaque that remembers these facts, and I read it the first time and I discovered that that was the building that had so much meaning. And from the beginning of my direction of the Casa, especially with the collective of Italian-American women, we decided to do more so that people would know what happened in that day. We have done events with historians and other experts. Anytime that there is an Italian politician, we offer to take him or her to see the site of this tragedy. And when the coalition started the works for the monument, of course we wanted to be part of that and help understand what is behind this beautiful monument that is going to be unveiled.
Abraham Bidowitz, 30 years old. Annie Nicholas, 18.
We were founded in 2008. A bunch of activists came together. They had met each other largely through the Chalk Project, which is a project that was started by an artist, Ruth Sergel, where individuals come into New York City on the anniversary of the fire, March 25th, and they chalk the names and ages of the workers who died in the fire in front of the places where they live. And it's a really great project, but it's very ephemeral, right? So the first rainstorm or the first time a landlord comes out with a bucket of water and the chalk is gone. We also wanted something to tell people the story of the fire, even when no one was chalking, and even when there wasn't an event in front of the building on March 25th. So we met repeatedly with the owners of the building, that's New York University. And eventually they said, okay. We signed an historic agreement that allowed us to hold a design competition, and the first place winner was the design team of Richard Junyu and Uri Wegman, and their design Reframing the Sky is beautiful, and we think it's going to be terrific up there on the building.
After we had won the design competition, we always knew there were many aspects of the memorial that have yet to be designed. Part of what was so powerful was the community of advocates for labor, for women's rights, for immigrants around the Triangle Fire. We decided to have a community-driven event to make the stainless steel something that resonated with the soul of the project. In March of 2019, people from the public were invited to bring a fragment of fabric that in some way encapsulated their relationship to the Triangle Fire. And we had them sew in their fragment of fabric into a length of canvas that measures 22 inches by 322 feet. Then all 300 some feet of this was scanned and transferred to the stainless steel. And it was an incredible experience for everybody. It mirrored the process of the garment workers. and the community that contributed in the fabrication of the memorial were empowered. I think there's a lesson there. Engaging people is more important than form.
The story of the fire is brief but really powerful. It was a Saturday, and the building was filled with workers. One of them must have been smoking a cigarette, and an ash fell into a bin of cloth. The fire just burst into life. There were no regular fire drills, no fire extinguishers. The doors to the factory opened inward instead of outward. The workers on the 8th floor found out about it first because the fire happened there, and they were able to get out. The switchboard operator called up to the 10th floor, and they were also able to get out. Workers on the 9th floor didn't find out until a few minutes later, and by that time, for many of them, it was too late. They rushed to the doors, but they opened inward, so you had to do what every fiber of your being told you not to do, which is go back into the heat so that you could open the doors to get out. And there was a barrel of oil in front of one of the exits, and when that burst into flames, that exit was no longer usable. The other exit was bolted shut to keep out union organizers, to keep the workers there from taking unnecessary breaks, and supposedly to prevent theft. Workers then turned to the windows, and to their horror, I'm sure, they realized that they couldn't be saved by the firemen because the ladders only went up to the 6th floor. So they jumped. At least 60 of them jumped to their death. The repercussions of the fire were really extraordinary. People were outraged and turned their anger into a determination to make sure that this never happened again. New York State organized the Factory Investigating Commission, and they made a number of recommendations to protect workers, to keep workplaces sanitary. So it really galvanized workers around the world, and I think it's going to keep inspiring people as long as we keep telling this story.
This memorial. We have brought the names and ages of immigrant workers, most of them women, all of them robbed of a long and full life, into the light where they belong, where they will never be forgotten. By honoring the Triangle workers with this memorial, we are making a statement about the dignity and humanity of every worker, past and present.
We are particularly thrilled to have this exhibit because it really presents a different way of monumentalizing history. It is not a monument to one great person. This is a monument to a collective, to a group of people that were held together by the fact that they were working together. And the fact that the designers and architects that conceived this project wanted the monument to be produced not by one person, but by a collective of people that put together the memory, sewn them together, and find that idea particularly brilliant. It's a collective effort of memory that remembers the collective sacrifice of these workers.
I think it's important to memorialize the Triangle workers because Triangle fires are still happening. Maybe not in Greenwich Village, but certainly in Bangladesh, in the garment industry in California. And I think that what we want the Triangle Memorial to do is to inspire those people. I get emotional talking about this. Is to inspire people. We see the memorial as, yes, it's a piece of art. Yes, it remembers something that happened over 100 years ago, but we also want it to speak to now. We imagine this memorial will be an organizing and a teaching aid to inspire future generations of activists to organize and to make the world into a better place where working people have dignity and rights and safety.
So now you know all the story. You just need to go to see the ribbon upstairs. Have you already seen the ribbon? Yes? So we have also the only survivor of that tragedy is the sewing machine that survived time and fire. You can see those letters in metal, the letters that came off from the memorial, so that the name get reflected on the surface underneath. Is really a touching exhibition, but it needs to be explained. So I'm glad that everybody here had that chance. So our guests tonight are Edvige Giunta, professor of English at New Jersey City University, and author of Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, whose Italian translation, financed by Casa Italiana, will be published soon. We have Etrita Abdullahu, I hope that's the right pronunciation, former student of Professor Giunta and dancer who choreographed and performed a ballet piece inspired by the Triangle Fire. Last but not least, Jennifer Merz, artist, illustrator, and author of Steadfast, Francis Perkins, champion of workers' rights. And now a message from our director, Stefano Albertini. I'm sorry not to be physically present with all of you tonight for this very special evening. It is special for me because it brings back to the Casa the scholar with whom and thanks to whom I came to know about the Triangle Fire and its innocent victims, my friend Edvige Giunta. And with Eddie, we have two brilliant artists, a dancer, choreographer, and an illustrator, because memory is guarded by history but is kept alive by art. And it is also special because it is dedicated to the loving memory of Alba Capriati by her sister Giusetta, a longtime friend and staunch supporter of Casa. From the day of its inauguration until now, has kept us in her heart. I invite all of you present tonight to join me in thanking Giusetta, Eddie, Etrita, and Jennifer very warmly. Applause. And finally, please stay after the talk for light refreshment upstairs. There are colombe, a typical dessert for Eastern that we serve in Italy, that is donated by the Italian pastry chef Fiasconaro, a friend of Giusetta. Thank you.
Grazie.
Please welcome Edvige Giunta.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure to be back at Casa Italiana. It feels very much like a cultural home for me. And as someone who comes from another place, comes from Sicily, I've been here for 40 years, but will forever feel I come from somewhere else. And this is one of the places in the United States where I have felt very much at home. And the many years of collaboration with Stefano and the staff at Casa Italiana have created so many memorable events, forged professional relationships and friendships that have really fed me. So I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm very moved to be able to talk about the Triangle Fire, which is so dear to me, and to do so, and also to be able to be in the company of my former student and brilliant dancer, Etrita Abdullahu, and Jennifer Merz. And so I look forward to also the conversation with them after each of us presents. We've done many presentations of Talking to the Girls, and I owe it to my friend Annie Lanzillotto to suggest that we dedicate each event to the memory of a particular worker. And since the importance of name is so central to my talk today, it's a good reason to start with the name. So this is for Isabella Tortorelli, age 17, who died on March 25, 1911, in the 10th Triangle Fire. The names resonate. The names matter. The names must be remembered. How and why do we remember? This question has shaped my work as a scholar of Italian-American women authors. a teacher and writer of memoir, and an editor, most recently of Talking to the Girls, intimate and political essays on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. I edited this book with the wonderful Marianne Trasciatti, that you have the pleasure to listen to now, who as president of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition played such a key role in the creation and the installation of the Triangle Fire Memorial. Our collaboration was kind of perfect because it was personal and public, memoir and monument, intimate and political, not as dichotomies, but as intersecting forces that feed individual and collective memory at the heart of our book. Talking to the Girls is exploratory writing in the ghost country of memory. The shifting layered truth of personal memory finding its seat at the table of history. Now, thanks to the generous support of Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò, the Italian publisher Jacobelli will release Le ragazze della Triangle. I love to say that title in Italian. And it was kind of hard to come up with this title because Talking to the Girls really could not be literally translated into Italian. But Le ragazze della Triangle, it feels right. And the book has been translated by the Italian feminist scholar Paolo Bono. And Paola says of the book, I was struck by encountering the stories and lives of women who have made history, women whose names must be heard in order to continue their work, young women whose deaths inspire change, and other young women who wanted to turn those deaths into transformative energy. Jacobelli's editor, Enrica Dauge, explains how well the Italian edition of Talking to the Girl fits Jacobelli's mission to highlight women's perspectives and the power of memory work. And Anna Maria Crispino, whom I consider the kind of Italian godmother of this book, and she's the editor of the important Italian feminist journal Leggendaria. She's the one who proposed the book to Jacobelli, and this is what she says of Talking to the Girls. Talking to the Girls testifies to the liveliness and quality of the studies and research of memoir writing that revolves around a significant event in the history of the Italian-American community, with a view to its transmission to younger generations. The book highlights how and to what extent history needs a continuous memory work that elaborates facts, emotions, relationships. This work of rewriting, Anna Maria says, appears even more necessary for a country like Italy that has often neglected the representations and implications of an Italianness rooted and cultivated in other contexts to be lived and practiced in a nationalist way. An anthology is not a mere collection. It's a community project. A community project that gives life to a new understanding of an issue, a literary tradition, a historical event. When we started our work on Talking to the Girls, we asked our contributors to tell us the stories of their involvement with and commitment to remembering the Triangle workers. An anthology is born out of a sense of community, but can also strengthen the community, clarify its intention, its purpose, the sense of belonging and solidarity that animates individuals and brings them together. I've often thought of the classroom as a kind of anthology, a community project where diverse voices engage in transformative conversations. As it happens when I assign the name project to my Triangle Fire students at New Jersey City University. There's something daunting and humbling about asking a group of people, most of them in their 20s, to remember someone they never met, someone unrelated to them, someone whose photo they have never seen, may never see because there are no surviving images of that person, someone whose life typically rests in the obscurity that shrouds working class lives. All they will know is a name, age, date of death, home address, sometimes the names of the parents, and whether this person burned inside a factory called the Triangle Waste Company, or jumped, or fell to their death. This one gruesome detail they will learn as they squint their eyes to decipher the writing on a death certificate. For several years, I have undertaken this memory work with trepidation. In late January, when the spring semester begins a couple of months before the anniversary of the Triangle Fire, I asked the students in my Triangle Fire course to choose a name from the list of Triangle Fire dead kept by the Kiel Center of Labor Management and Documentation Archive at Cornell University. Their memory work begins by learning the name and the age of the worker and continues in the weeks and months to come as a series of minute acts of memory that help create an intimate connection between each of my students and the stranger who died over a century ago. I ask, who is your triangle worker? And why did you choose them? And they answer, I chose Julia Rosen because we have the same name. Sarah Brodsky was 21, like me. Kate Leone was only 14, so young. Providenza Panno was the oldest, but she was only 43. Every student has a reason, small, accidental, coincidental, and from that initial choice, a commitment to learning, to remember is born, grows, leads to creative, stirring, extraordinary projects, such as the Dance of the Seamstress, a gorgeous ballet that Etrita Abdullahu choreographed and performed at Washington Square Park in March 2021. Etrita's work has moved me so deeply that very often when I talk about the Triangle Fire, I quote from the beautiful essay that she wrote. And today, before I get into the rest of my talk, I have the great privilege of inviting Etrita to share some of her beautiful writing inspired by the Triangle Fire, and then I will return.
This is dedicated to Rosie Wiener, 23 years old when she died in the Triangle Fire. I am Rosie Wiener's age, and I am also an immigrant who came to the US when I was 18 years old. I have big dreams, just like Rosie did. Since I started researching and learning more about Rosie, she became a companion and a guide through my Triangle Fire journey, especially when I was choreographing the dance. Dance of the Seamstress portrays the innocence of the girls, my innocence, and the amazement I experienced when I first walked the streets of New York City, as a teenager, not knowing how cruel these streets sometimes can be. I did not want the tragedy to be the only story about them in my dance. I wanted to look like the girls. I wanted to wear something like what they wore, a shirtwaist, a long skirt. I wanted to go back to 1911. I wanted to evoke the fire, but I also wanted my dance to have two parts, to show the girls as newly arrived immigrants and as happy girls eager to live their lives in this new world. It is early in the morning. The sun is just rising. It is March 20th, almost spring, but still cold in New York City. I take the phone and I watch my dance to see how it looks. If the recording is fine, I make some notes in my head for some of my movements, and I get ready to dance again. But it is hard to take my coat off. My teeth are chattering. I go in front of the arc of Washington Square Park. I take a deep breath to stabilize my breathing so my body stops shaking, and I nod my head, letting my friend know that I am ready to start the recording. The music starts playing, and now I am back in the days when I first walked through the streets of New York City and the amazement, the excitement I felt. The sun hits me. I do not feel the cold. Then I start seeing the flames. The music sets everything around me on fire. I move frantically and in panic. I jump toward the camera. I fall on the cold, hard pavement. The faces of the Triangle girls that I had seen in pictures appear in front of me, especially Rosie Wiener's face, like an old black and white silent movie playing before my eyes. I rise and I walk back. I am broken. I am calling them, embracing them, holding onto their names.
I like to say that teaching is an honorable profession, and what a privilege it is to spend so much of my life in the classroom and to still have the opportunity and seen Etrita and I. Is this the first time we actually see each other in person? Yes, because Etrita was my student during the pandemic. So this is the first time we actually have met in person. Wow. So, there are many ways we can talk about the Triangle Fire, and I come to you as a teacher and as a memoirist, as someone who, both in my own experience, but also as a teacher of a course on the Triangle Fire, I have been really thinking hard about how do you create a memory of something that did not happen to you? How do you remember? And that's the work that Marianne and that Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition had done with the Triangle Fire Memorial. That's the work that Marianne and I did in the anthology. For me, the work, the question is very much focused on how you bring the work into a classroom with sometimes the students who may not be necessarily interested. How do I awaken the interest? How do you make it grow? So consider my remarks here as a kind of illustration of my own process and meditation on how you learn to remember the Triangle Fire. One late night in Manfria, the seaside area of my hometown of Gela, Sicily, I contemplated the countryside illuminated by the stars, yet still indecipherable. In the distance, a cluster of lights beckoned. It was the town of Licata, about 10 miles away. I sat back, listening to the haunting call of the carcarazzi. A carcarazza, fa li figli e poi l'ammazza. Magpies eat the babies of other birds, hence the old Sicilian saying, magpies make children and then kill them. I stared at the lights and thought of Clotilde Terranova. Clotilde, who left Licata in December 1907 when she was 19. The memory of the worker who died in the Triangle Fire and of the girl from nearby Licata merged. And Clotilde found a deeper, lasting place in my memory. When history becomes personal, it enters into us. In the distillation and absorption of sensory experiences, memories are formed. History enters into us even when we are not direct witnesses. We live in the aftermath of the past, Caroline Forcher reminds us. When we reconstruct historical events, there are the hard facts, which allow for a modicum of accuracy, and there is the truth of memory. The truth is subjective, partial, flawed, but it offers glimpses into the past that quietly call to us, ask that we pay closer attention. We search for cracks, in the walls and on the floors, and look inside the lining of suitcases and on the backs of photographs to gather the scarce traces of what remains so inaccessible that our only recourse is imagination. We lay the pieces in front of us to try to make meaning, to connect story and history. And that piecing together of fragments may crack open those windows of history that have been closed shut. About 500 people worked at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company on March 25, 1911. The exact number is not known. All the records burned in the fire. 17-year-old Katie Weiner survived by grabbing and sliding down the elevator cable after the car that left the 9th floor for the last time, but her sister Rosie died in the fire. Their great niece, Suzanne Pred-Bass, ponders the enigma of Rosie's age. Quote, "What age best suits the mournful, unspoken family story that is Rosie's story? A death story, more than a life story. Only 19. 19 screams the unbearable injustice of her death. Just a teenager, not yet 20, only 19. But 23 would give her a little more life. In the end, I settle for the presumed accuracy of the historical record. She's 23 that morning of March 25th when she leaves home for work. She will always be 23. History is slippery, complicated, mutable affair. Every account of the past matters as it is remembered as well as it is recorded, even when accounts contradict each other. Sometimes archival records conceal small facts that, if revealed, would tell a different story. Trauma begets silences, omissions, distortions. The twists and turns of memory may be involuntary, unconscious, but they carry nuggets of truth. And the act of remembering weaves threads that connect the present with the past. In 1907, when 19-year-old Clotilde Terranova left Licata for New York, there would have been no such lights as the ones that made Licata visible from Manfria a century later, as I remembered a young woman I had never met and who was not my ancestor. How dizzying it must have been for Clotilde to leave Licata, where people and animals slept in the same room, in those one-floor homes, and to be pulled into the vertical rapture of New York. Look up. A crowd of New Yorkers looked up in horror at the 10th floor Ash building in flames. The reporter William Gunn Shepard stood in the crowd. He wrote, "I looked up, saw that there were scores of girls at the windows. The flames from the floor below were beating in their faces. Somehow I knew that they too must come down." The firefighters raised a ladder to rescue the women and the girls perched on the windows. The ladder rose 1 floor, 2 floors, higher, higher. At the 6th floor, it stopped. The terrifying moment is reenacted at the yearly Triangle commemoration by New York City firefighters as a ritual of human powerlessness and grief. The crowd looks up at the new windows from which so many jumped. The ladder that could not reach the 9th floor, as useless as the nets that broke under the weight of the falling bodies. Clotilde jumped. Clotilde Terranova's name appears in two sites at the birthplace, on a plaque on the public library and on the street sign of a path in the public gardens near Viale 8 Marzo. A few years ago, I went to Licata and took pictures of those signs. Clotilde. In the nocturnal silence, I spoke her name. Clotilde, Clotilde Terranova, Terranova, Newland. For centuries, Terranova was the name of my town. In 1927, a fascist podesta restored the ancient Greek name of Gela. By 1907, it was still Terranova. Did Clotilde wonder about the neighboring town known by her last name? Did she have family roots in the town that had not yet been renamed Gela? In 1977, I was a high school senior, living in Gela with my parents. I was an angry teenager with a haircut so short that people mistook me for a boy. I have flattened all evidence of femininity, no makeup, baggy sweaters, Roy Rogers jeans, and the blue bomber jackets that I had persuaded my mother to buy in the boys section of a clothing store. A year earlier, I had become a feminist. My activism, spurred by anger and the violence against women and girls, which I had experienced directly. A clandestine abortions, a gender disparity, even within progressive left-wing groups. I had always chewed the bread of politics. My father, Vincenzo Giunta, fed it to us. But this was different. The telejournal is the soundtrack of lunchtime. I sit across from my mother, who runs from the stove to the table back and forth, rarely sits. I sit to the right of my father. The TV is across from him. I perk up when I hear the words women, factory, fire, feminism. The image of Italian feminists on the streets of Rome and Milan is on the screen in my peripheral vision. I turn right, look, take it all in. This is my first encounter with Triangle, a reconstructed memory. Where else, how else would I have heard about Triangle in my Sicilian hometown? It was March 8, 1977. 4 days earlier, I had recorded my first feminist program for Radio Gela, Sfruttata con onore, honorably exploited. The title for my program was inspired by Maria Rosa Cutrufelli's book, Disoccupata con onore, honorably unemployed, which I read a year earlier. I only knew that the fire had occurred in a factory. I did not know it was a garment factory called Triangle. I did not know that the workers were immigrants, that many were Italian, that most of the Italian dead were from Sicily. I didn't know any of their names. Yet, on March 8, 1977, I knew that I would speak of the early 20th century New York City fire on my next radio program. In my detailed script for the program, I wrote, play 8 Marzo, the anthem of the Movimento Femminista Romano that went, ricordatevi di noi, siamo morte in una fabbrica. Remember us, we died in a factory. Ricordatevi, remember. This is where my Triangle story begins. The roots are older and deeper and dig across geographies. Yet, this partial encounter with the fire, historically inaccurate as far as the date is concerned, the fire occurred on March 25th and on March 8th, grounds me in a budding feminist activism. And even the commonly mistaken attribution of March 8, International Women's Day, teaches us something. The feminist historian Emma Baeri explains that so much of Italian women's stories and experiences have been passed down through conversations and oral traditions, not through history books. Quote, we have been on the margins and outside official history, so as women, we try to pass on the story and push them into the realm of history the best way we can. So that is how we end up in Italy with the imagined memory of the Triangle Fire. End quote. In 1977, I was 17. the same age as Isabella Tortorelli, the first Triangle girl whose name I learned in 2001, whose name I shouted from a tiny card with her name printed below a reproduction of Italian-American sculptor Nancy Azzara's collage, Fire, whose name I chalked in front of 116 Thompson Street. Every year, Triangle activists receive an email from filmmaker Ruth Sergel, the creator of Chalk. She gives each of us a name or two, and we fan out into the neighborhoods of Manhattan, the Bronx, Harlem, Brooklyn, even Hoboken, New Jersey. Alone or in groups, with friends, with our children, with our students, we write the name and the age of each of the workers who died in the fire. We carry buckets of multicolored chalk for this spring ritual that announces that we remember, that the streets remember Clotilde Terranova, Rosie Wiener, Isabella Tortorelli, Jenny Stellino. Stellino, from Stella, like i stigi avvampati, the stars on fire in No Name, a song on the fire by Francesca Incudine, a singer from Enna, the Sicilian interior, land of Persephone, where the grief for the loss of girls is embedded in the stones, buried in the soil, flows in the water. Demeter is the goddess of abundance and mourning. Triangle enters our memory, sits with other losses, befriends them. Memory work cannot be self-contained or solitary. Triangle sisterhood is a series of interwoven acts of remembrance. We remember together, and when we are alone, we remember for the dead, with the dead. We talk to the dead of Triangle. We make them our dead, to be mourned. We remember the women and girls who made shirtwaists, those fashionable items of clothing that, at the turn of the century, revolutionized fashion and celebrated the idea of women's autonomy and freedom. Before the flapper, there was the Gibson girl, smart and bold in her shirtwaist. The shirtwaist freed women from those cumbersome ankle-length dresses that impeded movement. Oh, the ease, the daring of a shirtwaist worn with a skirt above the ankle. Even a factory girl could afford a modest, yet still appealing shirtwaist. Those 20th century girls, those factory girls, those Triangle girls, hungry for life, did not just make shirtwaists, they wore them too. They stand on the edge of time, impatient after a 12-hour workday, eager to leave right before the fire alarm rings around 4:40 on March 25th, 1911, as they gather coats, adjust hats, hold tight purses containing their week's pay. A beautiful spring day awaits them outside. Are you coming? Fire is fast, determined, indifferent. The owner, Joseph J. Ash, boasted that the building was fireproof. He was right. When the firefighters were finally able to go inside the factory, the walls were still standing, but whatever had been inside had burned beyond recognition, including the bodies of the workers who had not jumped to their death to escape the flames, or those who had tried to escape by the flimsy fire escape that did not reach the ground and collapsed under the weight of the women, the girls. Every time I see a fire escape, I think of the twisted remains of Triangle. Girls. There were so many girls, 65 teenagers. Like Rosaria Maltese from Marsala, where the Sicilian sun is so stunning that they celebrate Il Festival del Tramonto, the Sunset Festival. In Marsala, the orange ball of the sun has already sunk into the Mediterranean. People have dined and are getting ready for sleep when the fire burns 3,000 miles away and Rosalia, her sister Lucia, and her mother Caterina die at Triangle. Rosaria Maltese is the youngest to die. She's 14. Rosaria's nephews, whom she will never meet, Vincent and Serafin Maltese, will remember the women of their family and all those dead the Triangle workers through the Triangle Fire Memorial Association. Vincent used to take 146 flowers on March 25th and lay them in front of the Ash Building. In May 2014, I watched him dignified, mournful, next to Laura Boldrini, president of the Italian Camera dei Deputati, who has come to pay tribute. Remembering Triangle is visceral, personal work. I learn it again and again with my students. When you press the chalk against the pavement, when you hold the shirtwaist on a bamboo pole, when you stand next to your daughter during the pandemic, both of you wearing masks, holding a poster with the name of Isabella Tortorelli, when you tell your students to check the label of their clothes to see where they were made, when you make a shirtwaist, when you paint a face, when you remember the girls and women of the factory fires of Newark and Tazreen and Kader, when you call a name. Triangle is a spirit that grows through people, a message. In 2001, with my Italian-American sisters, we gathered at Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò, part of New York University. NYU owns the Brown Building, formerly the Ash Building, which housed the Triangle Waste Company. On this building, the Triangle Fire Memorial, you find the names of the 146. When I walk around the building on the day of the inauguration, I look for Isabella's name. When I find it, my heart skips a beat, and I think of her short life and the long journey to remember. Triangle is the story of those who left and those who are left behind. In Maria Messina's story, America 1911, the character Gnà Maria says, "L'America is a woodworm that eats away at things that attacks, and when the time comes for a man to buy a suitcase, there is nothing that can hold him back." America 1911 does not follow the immigrants across the ocean to the land that for those who stay behind is a pipe dream. Messina is interested in the other side of migration, those left behind in towns that bleed from the loss of migration and remap Sicily in the topography of loss, identified by Anni Lanzillotto's wounded map of the Sicilian birthplaces of the Triangle dead. Palermo, Marsala, Marineo, Sciacca, Erice, Bisaquino, Cerda, Cerami, Sperlinga, Noto, Mazzara del Vallo, Sambuca, Capaci, Licata, Vittoria, Avola, Villafranca, Sicola. The other Italian born are from Puglia, Campania, Basilicata. The memory work must be done on both sides of the Atlantic. It must be done on the street, at home, in the classroom, here. We become the remembers, whether or not we have a direct connection to Triangle, we make connections together. We are modern-day prefighe Chianci Morti, responding to the call to cry for the dead, to make mourning visible. How do we remember the Triangle Fire? How do we tell its stories? When we write the names, when we call the names, when we make shirtwaists, when we build memorials, when we hold a piece of paper with the name of a Triangle worker in one hand and push it in our pocket, in our memory, we're doing memory work. We are claiming the dead as our dead. Memoirists know that you cannot write about the recent past. You must let it grow into its own archaeological site so that memory and imagination can get to work to tell stories. You must have remembered many, many times, each memory its own shard of the memory mirror, the broken mirror of history, ready to grow into a story that becomes yours too. Will you remember the Triangle Fire tomorrow? 10 years from now? What will you remember? Thank you. If there was a woman who did not forget the Triangle Fire, she was the grandmother of Tomlin Coggeshall. We had the privilege of having him as one of the authors who wrote an essay for Talking to the Girls. And this woman happened to witness the fire. And she committed herself to doing everything within her power to make sure that something like that never happened again. That woman was Frances Perkins. And now I have the great pleasure of inviting to the podium Jennifer Merz, who will talk to us about her book on Frances Perkins.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here today. I'm honored to be here today to talk about the Triangle Factory Fire at Frances Perkins. But first of all, I'm honored to be in the company of such brilliant women and with such moving testimony to the anniversary of the fire. I'll segue a little bit. I am an artist and a writer and illustrator of children's books, so I come at it from a completely different angle. And I could never have imagined that my participation in an exhibit for the 100th anniversary of the Triangle Factory Fire would ignite my passion for this chapter of United States history and lead me directly to the inspiring achievements of Frances Perkins. Let me back up a little bit. It was the year 2011, and I was a student doing a Master's of Fine Arts degree at FIT, Fashion Institute, in illustration. And I was invited to participate in a group exhibition on the fire because, of course, FIT is so much a part of the history of fashion and textiles, even though I was in the illustration department. This piece of artwork I did for that show. It's a shirtwaist collage. I picked it because I definitely wanted to honor the fact that the shirtwaist is the iconic statement of the times of what the young women were wearing, what they were making, and it did signify this modernity that had just come about, as we just heard about. This was the product that the women were making 6 days a week from dawn to dusk in those hideous workplace conditions for pennies a day. So my process to create this shirtwaist was I used special papers, rice papers, for the actual shirt itself. I'm a collage artist, first and foremost. I used lace in the shirtwaist and little buttons to make it authentic. And what I did was I found a poem by Carl Sandburg called Mill Doors. It starts off, I won't read the whole thing, but it starts off, "You never come back." It's a very moving poem. And I integrated that into the shirtwaist as kind of a pin tucking. Then I proceeded to do the background. I painted it in warm, somber colors. And for the background itself, I hand cut 146 individual little shirtwaists, cut freehand. Because to me, each of those victims, each soul that was lost, 146 of them, they were all individuals. So I could never use a cookie cutter kind of an approach in my artwork. However, together they formed an incredible pattern, a body of workers. I have done some other children's books before that are lighthearted and very young. So at this point, I really decided I wanted to delve deeper into the triangle and perhaps do a book on it. So slide number 2, please. The next picture I did in my collage style was the Ash Building on Fire. And what I did first was I toured the NYU campus and I took pictures of the brown building. And so some of the photography that you see in there, the windows and whatnot, that's my own photography that I have cut out and collaged. As we know, that this brown building is just steps away from where we are right now on the NYU campus. I inverted the perspective to draw the eye up and really highlight that fire that was happening on those top 3 floors of the building, because I wanted to capture the chaos of the workers scrambling. As we've heard, the doors were locked because they were, it was thought that the workers might steal, fabric or buttons or something. The fire escape crashed down. The elevator cable snapped when too many people got into it or on top of it. And although the New York City Fire Department came in rapid speed, those ladders were just too short. So you had this unimaginable tragedy. So here I was doing these pictures, and as I did my research, a name kept coming up, and her name was Frances Perkins. And I just kept digging because although I'd heard of the fire, I grew up in this area, I'd never heard of her before. And I thought, why? Why haven't I not heard of her before? So I set about finding out more. Next slide, please. I found out that she was a social worker in New York City at the time of the fire. She was young, in her early 30s. She was a woman of great courage and character, with an enormous sense of fairness. She was dedicated to changing the wrongs of society and fought with others to organize unions and change laws. Her grandmother, in fact, told her to push through doors at a time when she was being told, well, maybe the next thing you should do is get married, have children, become a teacher. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but that was not Frances. She was just not satisfied with the traditional roles of the time. So let's, and this indicates some of the horrors in the tenements where the people lived. So you had immigrants who just could not get out of poverty. And they lived in these awful conditions and then worked in these awful conditions. Well, Frances felt that she just needed to work on this. But even so, at that moment, her life was still going down a path that was relatively traditional. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right, on the day of the fire, on March 25th, 1911, Frances was actually having tea in this area with friends. She heard the commotion outside the windows of the horse-drawn fire trucks racing by. She rushed into the street with her friends. Everyone rushed into the street. And she gazed up, and she was horrified to see what she saw. She witnessed the young women on the ledges. And in this picture, that's what I'm showing here, the young women's feet on the ledge and the rather cartoonish, because this is a book for children after all, firefighters that are trying desperately to catch the women, which did not work at all. Well, Frances, when I stop and think about that, to be a woman who was so dedicated to social change to begin with and not tolerate any kind of, unfairness and injustice. And there she was, out on the sidewalk, not far from where we are, and seeing this. Well, that just absolutely galvanized her, that she would dedicate her entire life to workers' rights and women's rights. In fact, later, she said, and I'll read from my picture book here. Oops. Frances said, "I felt I must sear it not only on my mind, but on my heart, as a never-to-be-forgotten reminder of why I had to spend my life fighting conditions that could permit such a tragedy." So from then on, she dedicated herself to a life of service. She dedicated herself to worker safety, workers' rights, women's rights. First, she worked hard to become just a fire prevention expert. She would actually go around these streets of Manhattan and stand on a soapbox to keep the memory of the fire alive so that people would be fired up, if you pardon my pun, to fight the conditions that would allow for this tragedy. In fact, when New York City formed a factory investigating commission that we just heard about, Frances became the very first chief investigator. She pushed for new labor laws and was thrilled that 33 new laws were enacted within the first 3 or 4 years. She was the only woman in government rooms and eventually became the first woman ever in a U.S. presidential cabinet. She became the Secretary of Labor under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I'll take the 5th slide, please. But Frances wouldn't accept the job until FDR agreed to her plan. And see if this sounds familiar to you. Her ideas were that there should be a 40-hour work week. There should be minimum wage, workers' compensation, abolishment of child labor, unemployment insurance. Now, does that sound like the New Deal? Yeah. She was the force behind the New Deal. She created it. He rolled it out, but her ideas were an integral part of it. And she didn't stop there. Her next big idea was Social Security. She later said that the New Deal was born on 3/25/1911 at the Triangle. So the Triangle Fire actually set the wheels in motion for radical workplace reform. Before the fire, government had assumed it couldn't regulate business. But after the fire, thanks to Frances and others, government began regulating safety and fairness in the workplace. I'd like to leave you with a quote by Frances. She said, "There is always a large horizon. There is much to be done. I am not always going to be doing it. It is up to you. Thank you so much.
Well, this is for sure an inspiring evening. Now we have on stage our three guests. So if you have any questions for them, please let us know and wait for the microphone. In the meantime, I want to talk to you about a new web series that we just launched. The name is Nuova York, Hidden in Plain Sight. And it is dedicated to places that have Italian origins or are Italian related, but nobody probably knows about, or very few, and they are there in plain sight. One of these places that we filmed the last episode last Friday in front of the Beauty Bar. Everybody knows the Beauty Bar? It's a very famous place on 14th Street between 3rd and 2nd Avenue. And it used to be to host there the Italian Labor Center, and it was dedicated to the Italian chapter. It was the female chapter of a union of female workers. So all the workers there were employed in the textile sector, and in New York around the 1930s there were 12,000 women working in the textile sector, so quite impressive. But please now let's have the guests talking and go.
Any questions?
Is it possible to see Etrita's dance on YouTube or something?
Not yet.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Not yet, but we're really hoping that Etrita can get a grant or something to really finish the project and then be able to perform it in a public space, because it was performed at Washington Square Park. It was that one-time performance. So not on YouTube currently. It's stunning. It really is stunning.
Does anybody want to please? What type of music? 1 second only, we need the microphone because we are recording, so we want to have your question.
I was wondering what type of music did you dance to? Was it Italian folk tunes or American things, and from what era?
You want to talk about the...
Yeah. So when I created the dance, I wanted to include music that was related in some way to the girls. And actually, Annie Lanzolotto was part of it, and she told me that a song was very famous during that time, and the girls might have listened to it a lot, and might have, sang it, going to work, going off from work. It's Every Little Movement has a meaning of its own by Judy Garland. So that's how I start the dance. Like I said, I wanted the dance to be more than just the fire, more than just what happened to them. I wanted for them to be presented also as, young girls coming to a new country, having big dreams, having family members. And so the dance starts with them coming to the city, being excited, having fun with their friends, and then it moves on to them being part of the picket lines and being part of the unions and fighting for workers' rights. And then I heard also when I was doing one of the projects for Professor Giunta's class, it was the Triangle Fire in Music and Dance. So I was researching for all these artworks from different artists in music and dance. And Julia Wolf's music really moved me because it has parts of the music about where they use sewing machines and scissors, and it has those music effects. And so through my movement, I was trying to evoke that, but the workers did every day. And so I used her music to do the second part of the dance, them working in the factory, and then there are these sounds by the choir where they scream fire, and it really gives you chills. You really feel the panic in the music and what the girls must have felt during those moments. And then by the end of it, there's a choir that sings all of the workers' names. And those names are important. That's what we are trying to remember and work on now. So that's why that music spoke to me a lot, and that's the second part of the dance. Julia Wolf's music.
First of all, thank you all very much. It was a very, very moving presentation in every respect, so grazie mille. I'm of a certain age where I remember a television commercial that said, look for the union label, the ladies' garment worker union song. It was iconic for a while on television. Could one of you, perhaps you, talk about how the fire was so instrumental in the creation and the expansion of the Garment Workers Union and how it became so powerful?
Yes, it absolutely was instrumental in that. In fact, I believe it was within a week of the fire, maybe it was 4 days after the fire, there was a ladies' meeting that I'm not, I don't want to give you the wrong facts, so I'll say that it was a springboard to the formation of the Women's Workers Union that created the power to get more things done. I know in my study of Frances Perkins, she would say that if you can get together a group of about 40 people, like-minded people, you can get so much done. And she would continue to press for that. That doesn't speak exactly to your question about unions, but I've often thought about that, how, without getting too political here, with groups of like-minded people, so much can be done with a focus, with a laser focus, and definitely the unions. This kind of tragedy just spurred people to join the unions, and it was a battle to get going, really, because the Triangle was not the only fire, as we kind of heard hints of in the other presentations. There was a factory fire in Newark, New Jersey that was just prior to the Triangle, where the conditions were similar, and many people died. It wasn't 146, though, and so it didn't get the spotlight that this did in New York City. But these sorts of things were going on, and until government got involved with that pressure on them with unionization, very little was happening.
I think that it may have been a presentation here. They talked about Carlo Tresca using the Newark fire to organize, and he had, tens of thousands of people in Madison Square Garden, I think it was, after the Newark fire, which definitely doesn't get as much attention in modern times as the Triangle, but Carlo Tresca was a key organizer in that period as well.
Interesting.
So thank you again.
Oh, that's okay.
It's very interesting. I think there is much more that needs to be done on the Newark factory fire, and it really I just watched an interview with this journalist the other day, and I learned some more things about the Newark factory fire. That apparently, the day or in the days following the fire, there was a gathering of like over 1,000 people in Newark, and for about a month, the journalist was saying there was a lot of activity and response and outrage, but then it kind of faded away. But we have to remember also that the workers' awareness existed. I mean, the uprising of the 20,000 occurred in 1909. I mean, it's not that there was no worker awareness, but it's really more was the responses. I think, one of the most powerful archival images, which is one of the images that was in the documentary and also showed, is the images of the photograph of the policeman looking up. These were the same policemen who had beaten up the young strikers earlier. So there was, there were the obvious following the fire. There were these major legislative changes, but there was a shift in consciousness. I think there was an ethical shift on a collective level in what it means to witness the horror on that scale. And Newark kind of got reabsorbed. I'm really hoping also someone who lives in New Jersey that more will be done, and that the creation of the Triangle Fire Memorial will encourage more memorial work, because right now I think there is just a plaque in Newark commemoration.
And just jumping on what you said, that I think that afterwards there was a collective sense of almost guilt. I mean, I know Francis Perkins took it personally. How could we let this happen? And it was when that message started to really resonate with people that these were not just workers to another tragedy. It was something that they needed to step up and do something about.
Hi there, thank you for doing this. I'm particularly interested in the children's book because I think, Eddie, you posed the question, will we remember in 10 years? And so that's how the children will remember in 10 years. So I ran a New York City public library, elementary school library for 20 years. And I really didn't see too many books like this, and I think it really needs a place. So I could make a suggestion. I was also wondering, my question is, has the New York City Library Services, have they received this?
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
This book is self-published, and I have not reached out to them. My other books are traditionally published, and when I was going through the process of getting a publisher for this one, I felt that initially when I was working on a book just about the fire, and I hadn't really found Francis yet, many publishers said they loved the pictures, but maybe not the writing, or they loved the writing, maybe not the pictures. In any case, when I found Francis, and it was just by my research and by luck as well, because I was up in Maine at the time, and she was from up there, and it all came together. So I knew I had to put her into the book, and it would be about her. But it's a good question how to get exposure on it. I feel very strongly as a writer and illustrator of books that in order to keep memories alive, that's where you need to reach your audience, is young people, right. Particularly children, in an age-appropriate way.
Right, so in a practical way, just as someone who ran the library, I would often get boxes of books that had been donated. So if there were some means to reach kids, because I also taught social studies, and I think kids really need to learn about history, and especially this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I personally received boxes from, newspaper people, and they were writing a story about themselves. So it seems like it could be done. That would be great. That would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have something to add about this. I think that Francis Perkins wants to be rediscovered. I think she's I met Jennifer almost by chance one day when she came last week. She came to visit the exhibition, and I just showed her a little bit around, and I asked her if she participated to the making of the ribbon, as many others came to see it. She said, no, not really. And she told me a little bit about herself and this book. And I knew there was this event coming up, and I thought that Jennifer was actually perfect. And I didn't know anything about Frances Perkins. And I think she's definitely a woman that needs to be rediscovered, also here in the US. So if anybody here wants to contribute in her own way, in their own way to do it, why not? Yeah. We have time for one last question. Yes? Your microphone. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you, in your teaching work, you alluded to what, or Frances Perkins said, how could we let this happen? And unfortunately today we see that child labor is coming back. The federal minimum wage hasn't changed in almost 20 years. Workers' compensation more or less does very little for workers. Do you touch on those kinds of things?
It's really, because I teach at New Jersey City University, our student population tends to be working class, a large immigrant population. So very often our students also hold 1, 2, 3 jobs. They are primary caregivers in the family. So they really face economic challenges that allow them to connect with the Triangle Fire history on a very personal level. I remember during the pandemic, Annie Lanzilotto participated in a virtual event that we did and with my student, and I remember she said, you are you essential workers, you are the Triangle workers of today. So, and this actually, did happen because I had so many students during the pandemic who were holding jobs that put them at risk during the lockdown. So that's one, there is so you don't have to go to Bangladesh or Thailand to look at those economic challenges. One of the essays that is included in Talking to the Girls by Jacqueline Ellis, who's my colleague at NJCU, addresses the question of how do you encourage and teach a kind of ethical awareness to support sustainable and ethical fashion when to people who can barely afford to buy clothes. So these challenges are not just, they're not theoretical, they are part of the practice, the lived practice of these young people. So yes, very much at the center of the pedagogical work and the intimate work. And the idea is not just to remember and commemorate as something that is distant, happened a longer time ago, but to learn lessons that then can be instrumental in making life choices, in being an informed, in entering in the job market in a manner that is informed, in becoming your own advocate. And books like Jennifer, which is on my list, are really important. I think we could have a whole series of children's book on the women of Triangle. Annie Valier, who is the great niece of Rose Schneiderman, is working on a biography of Rose Schneiderman. But there is a long list of women activists, and these lives are so exemplary. So I almost feel that we should have some kind of work group that brings together authors and performers and librarians and authors and teachers, and to really come up with ways to to bring this work into the classroom. And, someone said, yes, you were saying, it's important to start with children. When I teach memoir, I always tell my students, start with childhood. Because the memories that you make as a child are the most important, they are foundational, they will shape you. So when you learn about the Triangle Fire as a child, it really shapes you. I brought my daughter she was 12 or 13, she was 12, at the commemoration that we did in 2011 with Casa Italiana. And in the months to come, she wrote a 30-page novella called Michelina's Journey about the Sicilian girl who had left Sicily and then ended up working in the Triangle Factory. So bringing the power of the stories to children can be absolutely transformative. And one question my students ask all the time, why didn't I know about this before?
Well,
I just wanted to add one or two little comments. For anyone who does want to learn more about Frances Perkins, there is an amazing Frances Perkins Center in Damariscotta, Maine, or it has just reopened, and the address may be Newcastle. It's up on the coast of Maine. They've got a great website. There's a lot of information there about their activities, their events, their books for children and for adults. So that's fantastic. And we are offering our books here tonight as well, if anybody happens to be interested.
yeah, you stole my last word. Yeah. So upstairs there are books, there are a lot of food, there are Columbus. So thank you all for being here tonight.